Whitney here. I am so glad that you're joining us today on the Global Leadership Podcast. It's here in this community that we get to come together and figure out how to be the best leaders we can be in healthy and holistic ways. Because we know at the GLN that leadership is hard and we don't want you to do leadership alone. That's why we are here to help. So thanks for tuning in. In season 8, we've been exploring leadership topics that you guys tell us you want more information on. So we've been bringing our friends and leading experts so this community can grow together, tackling one leadership topic at a time. And this month's theme is a theme that I'm actually quite fond of, not because I'm super comfortable with it, but because I've been there. This month's theme is failing well. You guys, I am a friend of failure. I know it quite well. In fact, I just messed up a couple of weeks ago. It was super embarrassing. I had to call my leadership, like our executive team, and work through some of our errors and mistakes. But I am here to tell you that my team, I learned so much from that failure. And honestly, it really did become the tool and catalyst for myself and my team to get better. Now, you may not have a story like that, but this topic does have massive implications for your team and your organization. Failure is a part of work and life. I will say it again to give you a permission slip. Failure is a part of work and life. The question becomes, how will we respond? There is a way that you can turn failure into one of life's greatest teachers, and that is exactly what our guest is going to tell us today. Our guest is Amy Edmondson. Amy Edmondson examines psychological safety, which she defines as a work environment where people feel comfortable sharing ideas, questions, and concerns without fear of punishment or humiliation. I don't know about you, but that feels so important to me, especially with the people that I work with closest. She's ranked number one on the latest Thinkers 50. She is the Novardist Professor of Leadership and Management at the Harvard Business School, and she's the author of 7 books and over 60 scholarly papers. Not to mention a sought-after keynote speaker. She was incredible at GLS 24. And this conversation, she's actually interviewed by our friend Jason Jaggard. Jason is an entrepreneur, best-selling author, executive coach, and speaker. We can't wait for you to dive in and really begin to understand the power of failing well. And before you do that, listen, you guys have gotten to know me over the past couple of episodes that we've shared together. You've learned that I've made mistakes and some of my highs and lows. I would love to get to know you. And listen, we can do that by you just hopping on and leaving us a review and letting us know who you are and how this podcast is helping you. I promise I will read every single one, and it can actually help us get a lot better to serve you really well. So thanks so much for hopping on and leaving us a review. Now let's get into our conversation with Jason and Amy.
Amy, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You gave an incredible talk at the summit, and it was, I'm going to say this in a good way, it was dense, which I like.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, like there's a lot of content there, which means there's a lot to chew on, a lot to process, a lot for people to talk about after the summit, and I know they will. And I'm very excited to dive in. But first, I want to go biographical with you a little bit, because I love your career trajectory. And of course, Harvard Business School is one of the best schools in the world. And I want to know, how did you get to that place in your life? And then the frame I want to add is, like, if you're talking to someone who's younger, not everyone necessarily grows up thinking I want to be a Harvard Business School professor or a research analyst, however you would frame that. Like, how did you get there? And yeah.
Count me among the people who did not grow up saying, I want to end up as a Harvard Business School professor.
Really?
I mean, it just wouldn't have
crossed
my mind.
Yeah.
I didn't have a clear idea growing up what I wanted to be, but it definitely wasn't that.
What did you want to be when you were younger?
Well, I didn't really know, but I thought, when I thought about it, I wanted to be a teacher and a mom.
Yeah. And you
and I'm a teacher and a mom.
And you do those things.
Yeah, that's right. So it's not that far
just
off.
Just at the highest level.
Right. Just when you're a little kid, you don't have that many options. I mean, you don't know what people do,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. So then how did you discover that teaching at a business school was a thing?
Slowly.
Okay.
So where should I begin?
Yeah. Well, you were born in what year? No, just kidding.
Yeah, I was born in New York City.
Yes.
And grew up there. Both my parents actually were born in New York City and also grew up there. So I had 4 grandparents.
Yes.
In walking distance. I mean, it was pretty idyllic.
And was
really.
it the New York ethos? Like, was it like a tough environment?
No, I mean, I think it was a great environment. It was very neighborhoody.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, it was, obviously there were no cell phones, but we just had so much freedom.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a childhood of having to be driven places.
Yes.
I had a bus pass,
Yeah.
my siblings and I, we went to school, we went to the museums, we literally did. The world was our oyster.
And did that carry with you, like that skill set of freedom and agency as you were picking a career?
I think it did. I don't have a memory of picking a career. Right? It followed my nose. I picked a job here and there, and I kept learning. And I think I kept a very open mind. And what is it? My question was always, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? Like, why am I here? Yeah. What difference am I supposed to make? I think the one thing that I absolutely internalized from my childhood was you're supposed to be here to make the place better. Right? You're not supposed to be here to kind of aggrandize yourself and take. You're here to give. But what that could mean anything, right? That could mean anything from, being a physician to upholding the rule of law to being a teacher.
Yeah. So, and then when did you realize that you were? I want to use some Bostonian language here, and I want you to own this moniker because when you teach at HBS, you can't really turn this down. Like, how old were you when you realized that you were wicked smart?
Well, no, honestly, I find a hard question to answer. But I did, because there's so many ways of being smart. But certainly by elementary school, I understood that I was good at school.
Okay.
Right. I wasn't necessarily good at, running in the playground or, there were most things other people did better than I, but school, I was really good at school.
Yeah.
Right. I just was, the things seemed to come easy. In fact, it's a disadvantage because by the time you get to college, there should not be, at the level of college, nothing should be coming easier. You're in the wrong courses, right? So you can become a little lazy,
complacent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's brilliant. So then you kept putting weight on the bar. Was there, what was the few chess moves?
Well, so for a long time, like through high school, it's about being good at school and getting into a good college, right? Yeah. Which is, a sort of very small idea. Now, I look back, I think, wow, I really cared about that. I wanted to do well. Yeah. I wanted to get good grades. Yeah. I wanted to get into a good college. I wanted to go to a college. And then the problem is, then I got there, and I went to Harvard College, and I just didn't. I didn't. In a way, I had lost my purpose or my sense of direction because it was so it was so caught up in doing well to get into college. It's like, okay, now I'm into college. Now what? I mean, so it had to be a little bit of a reset where I had to look around and say, like, what do I really enjoy? What am I really good at? Where can I serve? Yeah. And it wasn't at all clear to me. And halfway through college, I was lucky enough to go down the river toward MIT and go to a talk given by Buckminster Fuller, who was a great American kind of visionary. He was full of hope. Yeah. He said, we're here to make a difference. We're here to use our big brains to design things that make the world a better place. I thought, okay. Sign me up.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Right? That sounds good, right?
Awesome.
That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I didn't know really what that meant, obviously.
Yeah.
I didn't know exactly how I was supposed to do that. So what seemed like the logical next thing to do was to write him a letter.
Of course. Yeah, naturally.
So, dear Dr. Fuller.
Yes.
To my utter astonishment, he wrote right back.
Wow.
And essentially, it was a little vague, but essentially offered me a job. He said, when you finish up with Harvard, I'd like you to join my Philadelphia office.
No way.
I thought, okay. I said, I think that sounds like a job.
Yeah.
So I told my parents I'm going to go work for Buckminster Fuller.
Yeah.
And they said, well, when do you start and how much will you get paid? I
Yeah.
said, I don't know
Doesn't
any of
matter.
I don't know any of that.
Did you
I
hear
said,
the first part?
right. I said, yeah, I don't know the answer to any of that.
Yeah.
You know, I just know that this is really exciting.
A once in a lifetime opportunity. Yeah.
So I finished up. I went to Philadelphia, never been there before, even though it's not that far from New York. And, you know, in a way, I was just following my nose because I don't even recall ever. I mean, I let him know by letter that I would be arriving in September, but I never heard back.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I was arriving in September is I had already said yes to a summer job after graduating, running the Yale summer sailing program.
Okay.
So put that aside.
Okay. Yeah. If we had more time, we would definitely go in that direction.
We don't have time. So I show up and there he, you know, there's Bucky in his office with like 6 or 7 different people in the office and
inventing the future.
Inventing the future.
Yes.
I didn't realize, of course, that he was in the office about 2 days a month. Right, because he was on the road all the time.
Yeah.
And so he just happened to be there.
Oh, nice.
You know, okay.
Yes.
And you know, it was a very welcoming place. And to make a long story as short as I can, I basically became what he called his chief engineer. I did engineering drawings and calculations on geodesic dome. We were always trying to simplify the design so that you could make them more easily.
Yeah.
For very large applications.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was good fun, and then Bucky was, when I started working for him, he was 4 times my age. Right? So
I'm doing the math here.
nobody. Yeah, I was 21.
Yeah.
Right? He was
Okay,
85. Like, no, you're not going to have a boss 4 times your age ever again.
No.
Not that you have to, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because he was so full of joy, and I thought, oh, I guess.
You can be old and
You
happy.
can be
at
old
the
and
same
happy.
time.
Yeah. He was full of joy, and he would occasionally just tell stories like, oh, I remember when my father brought me into Boston. He grew up outside Boston to see the first automobile come to town. You're like, wow, I know you.
Yeah.
Like, I know someone who remembers the first time they saw an automobile.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Cool.
Right?
Yeah.
And he would go on to say, I remember, you know, all the grown-ups saying it's inherently impossible for man to fly. Right? That's an engineering fact.
Yeah.
And then that turned out to be wrong when, you know, he was about 8 years old. So then it's like, well, wait a minute. If they're wrong about that,
I wonder.
what else are they wrong about?
Yeah.
And that it was sort of how he thought. Like, what can we do?
Well, you're already starting to see a thread now of some of your work. And so
In a way, yeah. Failure.
that's right.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
innovation and believing what can't be done and assuming there's a solution.
Yeah,
to
a new
problems.
territory.
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So then I want to fast forward a little bit because
I know. Otherwise, we'll be here all day.
we could do 4
'Cause
hours
I am
on
old.
Bucky stories alone.
We easily could.
Some other time, could we
Right.
please?
You bet.
Okay, great. So now, for the sake of our audience, I love the genesis of your research, and I don't think you mentioned it in your talk in terms of when you wrote a paper and you expected. You expected these teams in a hospital, the high-performing teams, to make less mistakes, and then take it from there because I think this is so.
So I expected the high-performing teams measured with a team survey, valid team survey, to have lower error rates, and the data suggested the opposite.
Yeah.
Which threw me for a loop. So data said that the better teams, according to these wonderful survey measures, had higher error rates, not lower.
Which makes no sense.
Which makes no sense. And then I thought, you know, big failure.
Yeah.
My hypothesis was not supported. I'm going to drop out of school. No, you know, it's a little exaggeration, but true. I mean, it's how I felt emotionally.
Yeah.
And then I suddenly thought, wait a minute. Maybe they don't make more mistakes. Maybe they report more. Maybe they're more willing and able to speak up about mistakes. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that must be the case. Yes. But of course, you know, it becomes a very long story to actually show that with data. But later I called that difference in interpersonal climate psychological safety. Right? That sense that you can be candid, truthful, quick at work. And so then that gave rise to a long and pretty robust literature on psychological safety as an important element in team performance.
Yeah, and cited, you know, so for people who are listening, the way that you kind of gauge the value of research is how many times other people cite it, and not to make you toot your own horn, but like, what count are we at now in terms of citations?
Well,
thousands.
77,000 last I checked,
Yeah.
which is a pretty big number.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
I try not to check too often.
No. It's like Googling yourself.
Right. You don't want to do it.
You don't look at the stot ticker. Yeah. Okay, great. So, I love that you brought up psychological safety. For most people who know you know that's a big cornerstone of your work. And whenever something, on another podcast we got to interview one of Carol Dweck's people who pioneered growth mindset, and something is really hitting the zeitgeist when people are using it incorrectly.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how you know you're really winning.
Right.
And so I think when I hear psychological safety mentioned, almost always is from HR people, and God bless them, but also they're not using it usually accurately.
Often not.
And so can you talk to us a little bit about what psychological safety isn't?
Sure.
And what it is?
So, probably the simplest way to say it is it isn't feeling comfortable, right? It's feeling permission for candor.
Yes.
Permission to take risks.
Yeah.
Permission to learn and grow,
Yes.
which is not comfortable.
Yeah.
So it's not about being nice,
Yeah.
right? It's not job security.
Yeah.
It's a learning environment.
Yeah. It
It's
certainly isn't like being terrified of hurting someone's feelings.
No, and that's the thing. I recently I've been talking about the difference between being nice, which is kind of taking the easy way out, and being kind, which
Yes.
is saying the hard thing that I believe will help you.
Yes.
Now I may be wrong, but I know that I feel an obligation to tell
Yes.
you something I think, but it's not going to be fun
That's right.
for
It might
me.
hurt. Yeah.
Yeah.
In our work,
Or
we call,
you.
Yeah, we call it
Yeah.
Fierce advocacy.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's fierce,
Right.
but it's advocacy. And just ever since I got exposed to your work, I've been dying to see what you think about what I'm about to say. So, because when you're walking down a street, you can feel safe for two reasons. One is because there's an absence of danger.
Right.
Or two is because you're strong enough to overcome any danger. And I think most people assume it's the second thing
Right,
when you're talking
right.
about cycle. And really,
No,
the first, but
yeah,
it's the second.
I mean, I do want, when we say the word danger, sometimes we then think, life and death and all that.
Right,
and
right,
that's
right.
not, but it isn't the absence of risk, right?
Yes.
It's the willingness to confront risk.
Yes.
It's the willingness to take a chance, and it might not work out the way you wanted, right? You might tell your manager, I really see it differently, and they won't be thrilled.
Yeah.
But if they're any good,
Yeah.
they'll be, oh, thank you so much for telling
Yeah.
me.
They'll be curious.
They'll be curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me more.
Because you're going to think that whether you tell them or not.
Right.
And they might as
right.
well know.
And they might as well not be blind.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
That's what it's all about. It's about our ability to learn together. And that is mission critical
Yes.
in a changing world.
And you cannot learn together if you're not willing to admit your mistakes.
Yep.
For several years, leaders at the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability have been hearing from their members about a growing problem, something that has become one of the greatest financial risks to churches and Christian nonprofit ministries. That matter is leader care. That is why ECFA is excited to announce a new accreditation standard for the senior leaders of all member organizations. The leadership standard helps fill a gap, recognizing the crucial role that Christ-centered boards can play, consistent with ECFA's mission in encouraging healthy ministry leadership. As ECFA continues to prayerfully consider next steps, they know it is well worth it for all the leaders and ministries who will be served through this initiative. Visit ecfa.org/leadership-standard to learn more. Very special thanks to ECFA for sponsoring today's episode. And now let's get right back to our interview with Amy Edmondson.
Right. So back to this study,
Yes.
right? So I, this was a surprise. This was a failure, but it was a failure that led to the next stepping stone, which was a study that did succeed quite well. And that was really my dissertation, which developed a measure of psychological safety and showed that in a manufacturing company in Midwest, that this measure was highly predictive of team performance and team learning. And so that got me interested, and that I kept going with that. But from the very beginning, as you essentially helped us see, I've always been interested in mistakes and failure, right? And it's just what are the conditions under which I can actually confront them thoughtfully and wisely in a way to learn, and what are the conditions under which I want to hide them, run away from them, and all the rest. And the idea is we need to do more of the former and less of the latter.
Yes, because otherwise we don't grow, we don't learn, we can't
Right.
win, we can't
Right.
innovate. So
Right.
now we're going to dive into the book.
Okay.
And trust me when I tell you, I'm loving your book.
Thank you.
From quoting Daniel Kahneman to this. To we're going to get to the buzz, the step buzz illustration here in a little bit. So like I'm loving it. Can you tell us? I cannot remember the full title. Can you
Yes.
tell us the full title of the book?
In the United States,
Yes.
the full title is Right Kind of Wrong: The Science of Failing Well.
Thank you. And what is it called other places?
Well, in the UK, it's called Right Kind of Wrong: Why Learning to Fail Can Teach Us to Thrive.
Nice. Another time we'll talk about why publishers like to change titles of
Yeah,
things.
I know. It does make it confusing for citation purposes.
Oh, that's right. Which means there might be more than 77,000.
No.
If it's a different
It's a new book.
subtitle. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, in academic research, especially, although the citations I think go beyond that, but it could take 2 or 3 years to get a paper through the review process. So there's a delay between publication and citation.
And citation. Okay, so
Yeah.
one thing you didn't mention in the talk was,
Yeah.
which I really appreciated, was you made a distinction between 3 different types of, I'm going to use the big mistakes.
Yeah.
You break it
Well,
down.
failures,
Yes, failure.
right?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
So you break down to 3. Can you tell us what those 3 are? Because I think everyone kind of lumps them together.
Absolutely.
And it makes it really difficult to navigate.
Yeah, and maybe just in case it's helpful, I also make an important distinction between mistake and failure.
Yeah.
Right? Failure is a bigger category.
Yeah. Okay.
Mistake is a deviation from a known practice or knowledge base.
So there's something that I know.
Unintended deviation,
Unintended. I know
right?
how to do
If
it.
I intentionally deviate, that's not a mistake.
Yeah.
That's
a-
sabotage.
yeah. Or
right?
you use in the book.
or
you
an
use-
experiment.
Well, so you have violation,
Right.
right? And
Violation, yeah.
is
And
a
I'm not a
willful-
big fan of violations, but
No.
that's a willful deviation.
I know the right thing to do is
Breaking the
choose.
rules.
That's right.
Right.
Not to
I'm
do it.
choosing not
That's right.
to.
And then the other 2, there was failure.
Failure, which is an undesired result.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. And failure is an outcome.
Any result that wasn't desired.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
we tried
Any
to do this,
result,
it
right? I
didn't
didn't
work.
get the job I wanted. That's a failure.
Yeah.
Right? It's not catastrophic, but
That's
it's a
right.
failure.
And then there's the middle one, and you use 2 words. You use error and mistake.
And mistake. I say those are basically synonymous.
yeah,
One
that-
sounds more academic than the other.
Yes.
But it bothers me when people talk about all failures, failures and mistakes interchangeably,
Yeah.
because a mistake is something, when we're at our very best and people are supporting us, we can avoid most mistakes.
Yeah.
Right? We can follow the recipe and do it right.
Yeah.
And our lives are full of failures that are not caused by our mistakes or by others' mistakes.
Yeah.
They're caused by the complexity of our world.
Yeah.
Right? They're caused by the fact that Mother Nature didn't behave the way we had
Yeah.
hoped she would.
Asymmetric information.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then now.
So a
yeah, keep going,
basic
yeah.
failure is one that is caused by a mistake.
Okay.
Right? I accidentally checked the wrong box and bad things happen. That's a basic failure.
Yeah.
I text and drive, get into an accident, basic failure, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's utterly preventable.
Yeah.
Complex failures are the perfect storms. They're the failures that happen when a handful of things come together, and any one of them on their own wouldn't cause a failure, but the combination causes a failure.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, many adverse drug events in hospitals are complex failures. Right? Just a handful of funny little things at the handoffs, and then oops.
Yeah.
Those 2, when we're at our very best, we speak up when we have psychological safety. We can prevent and catch and correct otherwise. Then the third kind are the ones we have to learn to love, and those are intelligent failures, and they are the undesired results of a thoughtful foray into new territory.
Yeah. And you give us a checklist.
Yes.
So it's thoughtful.
In new
Yes.
territory, in pursuit of a goal, you've done your homework, meaning you have good reason to believe it might work.
You're not winging it.
You're not winging
Yeah.
it, and it's as small as possible.
That's right.
Right? You don't bet everything you have on an uncertain investment.
Yeah.
You don't launch a new product without testing it with a few customers.
Yeah.
All of that.
I just had this thought, and I wanted to see what you think. And not that I'm trying to change your thing, and you're very smart.
Oh, I don't mind changing.
You do talk about this in the book, so
Yeah.
I'm referencing your work. There's almost another piece too, and where the central point isn't necessarily to win, but to learn.
Yes.
Would you say? I'm not trying to add anything.
Yeah.
But is that,
No, absolutely. In fact, in chapter 5, I talk about kind of the personal side of it. And there is, especially, school teaches us to play not to lose.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is growth mindset comes in here, because
Yep.
instead of stretching, where I'll go for it because I know I'll learn more if I take the hard course.
Yeah.
We take the easy course because we need to get the A.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's playing not to lose rather
Yeah.
than playing to win.
Yeah. And we're playing to grow.
Yeah, playing to grow, exactly.
Yeah.
And if we if your primary goal, and I say choose learning over knowing, because your
Yes.
brain keeps pushing you to want to choose no. Like, hey, I see what's going on. here,
Yes.
right? I know what reality is all about. No, you don't.
No, you don't. Well,
Choose learning.
and let's click on that too, because I love that you talk about blame and just how, I love how you talk about how averse, I'm going to talk about myself, how averse I am to learning from my failure, acknowledging my failure, even seeing my failure. And you reference one of my favorite economists. You reference Daniel Kahneman's work, and just talk a little bit. You don't have to talk about his work, but talk a little bit about our human instinct to not even see the mistakes that we're making.
Yeah, I think it's partly learned and partly innate.
Yeah.
That our aversion to our own shortcomings and failures is so automatic that we're really good at tuning it out.
Yes.
Right. So something goes wrong, and your brain instantly thinks of 5 other things or people that are responsible for that.
The blame reflex.
The blame reflex,
Yeah.
because it's just, we learned maybe somehow in childhood, we learned that sort of if it's someone else's fault, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What makes us feel safer?
Mom and dad won't be mad at me.
Yeah.
Right.
But
he did it.
The exact opposite, though, is true. Because if you default to your blame reflex,
Right.
you rob yourself of the one thing that is
won't
necessary.
learn.
You can't learn.
You won't learn, and then you ultimately rob yourself of that sense of fulfillment and joy
Yeah.
that comes from accountability. From trying and often coming up short, but
Yes.
knowing that's in fact the human condition.
That's
Like,
right.
we'll try, we'll come up short, and we'll keep trying.
And even it seems as though you cannot navigate life without mastering intelligent learning or
Right,
intelligent failure.
failure.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think if you point to anyone who's truly, successful or fulfilled or both,
Yeah.
you will see
That
a
harness.
path of failures
That's right.
along the way.
Would you ever teach a class on intelligent failure?
I teach. I do talk about it in
Yeah.
various cases, but I was fortunate enough to be with Teresa Wellborn, who's a professor at Stevens Institute of Technology, and she does teach a whole class on failure. And all these really smart young people, and a lot of them are engineers and tech types, and they are allergic to failure.
Yeah.
And she teaches them that's not going to be helpful.
That's right. And it's okay. Everything's
Right,
going to be
right.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, and in that spirit, in your class,
Yep.
you do an exercise where you set out all these
Yes.
square. Can you tell our audience?
Yes. So it's and I talk about this in the book about situation awareness. So imagine this. Picture this 9-foot by 6-foot rug in front of you, and it's got a grid on it like graph paper, and it's got 6 squares by 9 squares. And some of those squares, when you step on them, they emit an annoying little beep, beep, beep.
Like Operation.
Yeah,
the game.
like the game Operation.
Yeah.
And some of them, of course, remain very quiet when you step on them. And I give this team exercise to the students. I say, you've got to find the path of non-beeping squares, the quiet squares. There is a path from beginning to end of contiguous, you can't just leap over buildings, of contiguous quiet squares.
Yeah. It's like Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
right?
and look at it, right? You can look at it all day long, you will not figure it out. You must step, right? You must step, and to step is to take the risk of incurring a beep.
Yep.
And so what happens is they're so risk averse. This is just a beep, right? It's not money lost.
Yeah.
It's not.
No one's dying.
There's no shock, electric.
Yeah. When I first heard it, I was like, "Oh, you get shocked." No,
it's
no
just
shock.
a beep, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a lovely sound, but it's not it's not a noxious sound either.
Yeah.
It's just data, and yet they get so tied up in knots about not wanting to make a mistake. And this is where I say it's not a mistake.
Yeah.
Right. A beep going forward is not a mistake. It's just data.
Yeah.
And it's valuable data.
I want to make sure I'm hearing, because it is a quote failure, because you didn't intend. You're trying to find.
Well, it's a failure, but it's not a mistake.
That's right. And that's the distinction.
Right.
Like, it's okay to fail. Yeah.
Because in fact, if you are unwilling to fail, I promise you'll never find the path.
That's right.
Right? Because the path can only be found through
failure.
trial and error.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry,
Trial
and failure.
That's
Right?
right.
Not trial and error.
Yeah.
Because it's not an error in new territory. Now, if you are stepping on old beeps that we've already discovered, then those are mistakes.
That's good.
Right? So vigilance is needed
Yes.
to have mostly new new beeps.
To pay attention, to learn the map of the territory.
To learn the ones, but if you're all like, tied up in knots about the beeps, then your brain doesn't retain them.
Yeah.
And so then you're doomed to repeat them.
Yes.
And that's life.
And that's also life if you don't learn.
Right.
Yeah. So then,
Right.
so then this obviously has massive implications for teams, innovation, especially teams like our team is a rapidly growing team.
Yeah.
And our marketing and salespeople right now are doing things that we've never done before.
Right.
And it's
You'll get some beeps going forward.
Oh, it's all beeps.
Yeah, it's all beeps, right?
It's beeps.
Yeah.
And so the question isn't how do you not make a beep? The question is how do you beep as quickly as possible,
Right.
so that we can learn and figure this out.
Yep.
And so talk to the people who are running organizations where you are, as a leader, they're either trying to do something that they've never done before, or they're managing teams that are trying to do something that they've never done before. What advice would you give them to help navigate this successfully?
First, and maybe most important, is call attention to the fact that we've never done this before. Like, make that explicit. Now, you could say, but everybody already knows we've never done this before. Nope. You must call attention to it. You must remind.
Yes.
Put it front and center that this is new. Because logically then, if this is new territory and no one's ever done this before, then there's no recipe.
No.
There's only going to be our trials
Yeah.
and learnings from our trials.
Yeah.
And the faster we get those learnings, the better off we are.
So then I'm going to ask you to play therapist
Yeah.
a little bit, just for a
Yeah.
second. So Sherry, our chief marketing officer, is actually in the room right now.
Yep.
And she was a very successful marketing person
Yeah.
at a famous company that I'm not going to mention the name of. And we stole her.
Where we knew how to do it.
Well,
right?
that's the thing. So she was winning in an environment there, and
Right.
we're so thankful we stole her.
Yeah.
And there's a personality type that is
right.
confident, capable,
Yes.
immensely capable, and what kind of permission giving, or like how would you?
Well, that personality type is often reinforced by a mindset of here are the targets, hit them.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is great in familiar territory.
That's
But
great.
that is not going to work in new territory, because how would we know what the right targets are? And by
Yeah.
the way, since we don't know,
Yeah.
we are going to sandbag. I mean, not sandbag. We're going to set them lower because we want to, we don't want
Protect
to
ourselves
lose
against failure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that's exactly the opposite of what you want. You actually want people to aim high. Team up, fail well,
Yeah.
learn fast,
Yeah.
repeat.
Yeah.
That's kind of the formula. So what I would say to this wonderful colleague of yours
correct.
is it will be hard, but it will be a little bit fun to unlearn some of those old habits from fast-moving consumer goods territory.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because this is new, this is different, and we don't actually know how it's going to work. So really calling attention to it. And chapter 6 of the book is all about context. And that's what you're talking about. You're saying if you take someone from context A, they're really good at context A,
Yep.
and then you put them in context B, we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking, oh, they'll just be good at context B.
Yeah.
They need to kind of reset and rethink, how do you win in this context? And when I talk about context, it's pretty simple, just 2 dimensions.
Yeah.
One, what are the stakes, right? I really don't want anybody to get hurt.
Yeah.
I don't want to blow a pile of money we didn't have to blow.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have reputational damage, right? So if you think
Yeah.
about essentially safety, financials, and reputation,
No existential
they
risk.
can be like a really low, like an electric maze exercise in a classroom,
Yeah.
really low,
Yeah.
no stakes at
Yeah.
all.
0 stakes.
But they treat it
Other
as
than
if it's
pride.
high stakes.
That's right, yeah.
And all the way up to, passenger air travel or cardiac surgery or something, right?
Big stakes.
High stakes.
Yeah.
And then the other dimension is uncertainty. And that is almost 100% correlated with novelty,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if you are, as your director of marketing has agreed to come do something more uncertain,
Yes.
then the design challenge is, how do we design it such that we keep the stakes low, right? So we
Yeah.
don't launch something at scale globally
Yes.
that we have no idea if it'll work or not,
Yeah.
right? We test and learn. We do it safely behind closed doors at first. Then we bring in a few customers or what have you.
So then can I
Yeah.
kick this around with you a little
Yeah.
bit? And so I'm not just being a narcissist. This is so if you're leading and one is if you're leading and everyone in the organization is terrified to make any mistakes, because I think that would be something that
That would be us. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, like she came from an environment that was If you made a mistake, you
were going to be highlighted, and not in a good way.
That's right. And so coming to our world, if you're not making mistakes, you kind of get in trouble a little bit, which is a huge adjustment.
It is
to make.
Yeah, it's a huge adjustment. In fact, I was so thrilled a few years back when I was at Google, their X, not to be confused with the other X.
That's right.
But they have this moonshot factory, where the whole point of this part of the organization is to try to solve really big, really tough problems. Desalinating water, all these really hard things.
Learning how to make it rain when it doesn't want to,
right?
All that kind of stuff,
right? So, and so the head Astro Teller at the time said to a large room full of employees, because they were worrying about layoffs, and so he said, the people who are at risk are the ones who aren't failing, because of the nature of what we do.
Yes.
Like, it's logical.
Yes.
He said, if you're never, if you're not having any failures, you're not doing your job.
You're not doing your job. Yeah, and I think I really, I got to talk to Dan earlier, and him and I were talking about entrepreneurialism, and I really believe that the future economy is resting in the hands of entrepreneurs and learning how to risk and solve unsolvable problems. Right. And you are such a permission giver to those people. Like, when entrepreneurs read your work, they're thinking, "This is my person," and I'm grateful that you write so that you can put this in the water for all of us.
Well, I kind of think entrepreneurs, I learned from them more than they learned from me. They already know this, right? If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're setting out in new territory. And yes, you want to succeed, but you understand full well that the risk of failure is present.
That's right. Yeah.
But you try to be smart about it. You try to test smart things.
And, well, I'm a little bit of a dogmatist, and I know we got to wrap up. We're out of time. But I do believe that everyone has a bit of entrepreneurialism in there.
Yeah.
You certainly do.
Well, thank you. I'm an intellectual entrepreneur.
That counts.
That counts. Thank you.
Right? Because you're exploring, and the whole point of research is to find things that no one else is talking about, to find a new area of research. You can't really win in that game if you're not looking for the angle no one's talking about.
True.
Right? And so I admire academics who are at the top of their game because they are entrepreneurs. And then I'm grateful that you're not just an entrepreneur. And to your point earlier, when you were hanging out with Bucky and with your parents and your family, you found a way to do it in a way that gives back.
Yeah.
And we're grateful for you. Thank you for speaking at the summit. You did an amazing job, and you're such a gift to us. And my hope is that through your talk and through your book, that you'll inspire a whole generation of people to reframe how they look at risk. And we're just grateful for you.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
I'm grateful for you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
That conversation was fascinating between Amy and Jason. I don't know about you, but about halfway through, I had to get out my notes and start writing out the different failures and mistakes so that I could fully understand them. And it certainly gave me permission to have conversations with my team, the team that I serve, about how we might approach intelligent failures. Amy defined intelligent failures as undesired results into a thoughtful new territory. My team has had this one idea that we've been sitting on for a little while, and I approached them because of this episode and said, hey, how do we bring that one idea into a new territory? We can learn from it. We don't have to have the mistake across the entire organization. We can learn from it and then build it out because of what we experienced in the smaller testing new territory. So I want to encourage you. Is there an idea that you have been sitting on or your team has been sitting on? And is there a new territory you can go into with that idea and learn from it? So I hope you can take that one step this week with an idea that you have. And listen, we know that making these decisions can be hard. Leadership is challenging, and we don't want you to do leadership alone. So from November 14th through November 21st, when you buy 2 or more tickets to the Global Leadership Summit in 2025, we want to give you a free gift. You can go and actually get 3 beautifully designed illustrative summaries of some of our incredible summit speakers that then you can take and print out and put on your desk and have as great reminders that you are not alone in your leadership journey. You can go to globalleadership.org/summit to actually purchase those tickets and get your free gift. You guys, it's always so good to be with you. We hope you know you are not alone in your leadership journey. We hope you take one idea forward this week. And remember, everyone has influence, so lead where you are.